We've seen the largest political protests against the militant group Hamas. Is this a turning point?
Yes, thank you for having me on. Yes, I think this is a very significant moment in the history of Gaza. Obviously, typically, we have not seen significant large-scale protests against Hamas, although it is important to note that throughout the recent conflict, we have seen evidence of some smaller-scale protests. Largely, those have been directed against the war in general. What we're hearing from the most recent protests is that there may be some evidence that people are actually protesting Hamas. That represents a fairly significant change, although, again, I would caution before making too many assumptions because reports are divided at the moment. But the scale of the protest has been growing, and I think that's an important point to emphasize right now.
Is there a realistic alternative to Hamas in Gaza?
That's a really significant question because Hamas have been in power since the takeover in 2007, and so we don't really know. The political opposition there it's not been a typical, what we would understand as a democracy. We don't see the opportunities for opposition to emerge, and essentially the people of Gaza have only had the option of Hamas. So that's a really big question, and I certainly think that the Western powers who are engaged in the peace talks, particularly those who would be slightly more on the Palestinian side, would certainly be looking at that option as we hopefully move towards the conclusion of this chapter of conflict.
You say that the international community is looking on, but what do you think these protests, what do you think it means for Israel?
Yes, well, reading some of the sources from Israel, again, some of the moderate sources are cautioning the Israeli government before assuming too much. Obviously, we saw protests in Israel this week as well. There is a fairly significant opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu, and people are protesting what they perceive to be some wrongdoing in terms of continuing conflict and not really pushing for the key outcome at the moment, which has been the release of hostages. So I think that there's certainly cause for cautious optimism on both sides. I would say that from the perspective of Israel, there's perhaps an opportunity to try to fully encourage some kind of political opposition to Hamas to emerge, but will there be trust for that opposition, particularly if they have the endorsement of Israel? I would certainly be somewhat pessimistic about that occurring, but certainly some opportunities there.
Andrew Sanders, thank you very much. That's Andrew Sanders, Senior Lecturer in Politics at Montfort University.